and that's what we're here to talk about today. So with that, I want Robert Conti, who is the Chief of Police for the Metropolitan Police Department, to talk about where we are.
Good afternoon, everyone. I want to thank everyone for joining us today. First, we're going to talk about the shooting that occurred up on Van Ness Street. Fortunately, none of the victims in that case have lost their lives. We know that 2 of these individuals are still in critical condition at area hospitals where they are being treated for their injuries. We continue to ask the community members for their thoughts and prayers for the families of the individuals who were struck by gunfire, but also just for that community as a whole as they went through this experience, and for our city. If you were watching the news coverage of this, you would have seen not only MPD on site, but numerous local and federal partners: FBI, ATF, U.S. Secret Service, U.S. Park Police, U.S. Capitol Police, our D.C. FEMS, HSEMA, just UDC Police, a number of partners that were on the scene. And I just really want to put a pin right there for a moment, because I promise you I'll end the same way that I start, talking about partnership. The reason we were able to amass so many resources to the scene of this very tragic event on Connecticut Avenue is in large part due to the partnerships that we have had with our federal partners, as well as our local partners. The intelligence sharing that took place also enabled us to quickly identify the shooter, now deceased Mr. Raymond Spencer, and prevent additional harm from coming to our community members. Just as a brief recap for everyone, at about 3:18 p.m., this suspect indiscriminately opened fire from the 5th floor apartment window, striking 4 victims in our city. I can tell you that so far out of that apartment, MPD recovered 6 firearms out of that apartment, 4 long guns and 2 handguns out of that location. Of the 4 long guns, 3 of those firearms are fully automatic, were constructed so that they're fully automatic. And we have 4 of those weapons that are on display, actually from the Van Ness Street apartment, that are on display just to the left of the deputy mayor. We know that this person, that Mr. Spencer, in addition to the firearms that we recovered there, he also had an apartment in Fairfax County, Virginia, where we recovered 3 additional constructs of firearms, long guns, long gun rifles. It's the bottom receiver part and other parts of the firearm that was at his location, or at the location in Fairfax County. I can report to you that here in the District of Columbia, we know that in excess of over 200 rounds were fired from this sniper from the apartment on Van Ness Street. We know that 200 rounds were fired, and we know that he had in excess of over 800 rounds, unspent, unshot rounds at his disposal inside of the location at Van Ness. At the apartment in Fairfax County, Virginia, while he had the constructs of 3 additional firearms there, he had thousands of rounds of ammunition at the location in Fairfax County. There are a few things that we know about Mr. Spencer that we did not know then. Again, this is very much an active investigation. We know that Mr. Spencer, that we've seen surveillance footage of him rolling in some suitcase into the Van Ness Street location the prior day, sometime around midnight, sometime around there. We know that Mr. Spencer, it appears that he went to Wheaton High School. He was a lifeguard at some point, and he spent a brief period in the United States Coast Guard. Back in, I believe it was 2017, he spent a brief period in the U.S. Coast Guard, just a matter of a few months as part of the Coast Guard. We're unsure why he was discharged or what he did, but he was just a brief period with the U.S. Coast Guard. We know that he moved into the apartment in Fairfax County in February of 2021, and that he rented this apartment here in Washington, D.C. in January of 2022. So he had been in that location, at the Van Ness location, for only a couple of months. A lot of people have asked, what is the connection to the school? We have not been able to decipher that. We're looking at his patterns of life. We're looking at what he did immediately before this. We know that 5 hours before the shooting, he went to the Giant on Connecticut Avenue and he purchased 2 Stouffer's meals, and he went back. He took those meals back to his apartment prior to the shooting taking place. There is a lot of information that I'm sure will come to light, and at this point, we're really asking for any additional information that the public may be able to offer us. I'm going to put this number out here, 202-727-9099. If you were to call in with additional information about your interactions with Mr. Spencer over the course of the last year, 18 months, we would ask that you select option 4 when you call that number to call in a tip. We're really trying to understand why this happened. More importantly, we're trying to understand all the different facets of this investigation. Financially, how was he able to purchase these firearms and rent these 2 apartments, et cetera? So there are a lot of things that we need to know that we don't know right now. But I am certain, through collaboration with our community partners as well as with our federal partners, that we will no doubt get to the bottom of this. Again, I want to thank all of the members of the Metropolitan Police Department, all of the members of our federal agencies and local agencies who responded. This was not a one-agency show. The reason why we're able to talk about this now is because of the hard work of the police officers and all the other agencies that were involved in this. I should note that there was a person who was arrested, and I saw some media reports of an individual who was being arrested by members of the Metropolitan Police Department, and they were quite unsure what that was. That individual was being evacuated out of the building, and police officers, Metropolitan police officers, had enough awareness about them to notice that this person had a satchel across his chest, and that person was armed with a firearm. He was a felon in possession, and those officers, in the midst of dealing with an active shooter scenario, were able to make an arrest of a person who was a felon in possession, who was actually in possession of a firearm during the course of all of this stuff that was happening with this with the active shooter there. So there's a lot of work that went into this, a lot of hard work, a lot of bravery from our officers. You certainly recognize that as these shots were going, this is an automatic fire. We had Metropolitan police officers and other officers running into danger, really not knowing exactly what they're running into. We know that on the 5th floor where this individual was, the apartment where he was, there was a camera set up in the hallway so that he could see approaching officers as they approached the apartment from where he was set up inside of his apartment, inside of the bathroom of the apartment. Again, I am very thankful that we did not lose lives that day. I am thankful that the men and women of law enforcement are safe, and I'm thankful that community members also stepped up to the plate and worked very closely with law enforcement officers to bring about the resolve to this situation. We can come back to Van Ness and talk about Van Ness, but I also want to talk about some of the other things that happened in the District of Columbia over the course of this. Again, when we talk about the Metropolitan Police Department and the demands set upon our officers, while this is going on, we had a triple shooting up on Kennedy Street with 3 residents. 3 residents were injured as a result of a gunman recklessly firing at some citizens in the block, in the 600 block of Kennedy Street. That is unacceptable. It is unacceptable behavior. We have distributed to the community, and this is where the community has an opportunity to play a part. We don't think that this individual is a stranger to anyone in the community. In fact, we released his image. While he does have a mask on the lower half of his face, I'm sure that anybody in the community can look at this photo who knows this individual, who knows who he is. I'm asking them to reach out to the Metropolitan Police Department and contact us at 202-727-9099, or you can text us anonymously at 50411. Thankfully, no one lost their life in that case. But I can tell you, when I went to Kennedy Street on Saturday and spent several hours up there with members of my family, my son, my mother-in-law, checking in with some of the businesses, talking to residents up there, some of the things that I heard were very disturbing to me when it comes to just the reckless regard that some people in community have for law-abiding citizens. And I think that that is something that we all can focus on. That is a space where we all can participate, regardless of what your area of discipline is in this ecosystem. We all have a responsibility in this space to make sure that we're doing the things that we need to do to hold violent criminals accountable. I should add, with respect to the guy who was arrested for coming out of the apartment building with the firearm, the felon in possession. His case was presented. That individual, probable cause was found. Probable cause was found that our officers made a good case, but unfortunately that individual has been already released back out in community. I think he went to the hospital or something, but those are the kind of things that we're talking about when I talk about accountability in community and making sure that we are all really focused on doing our part. Chief Conte is going to make sure that we're doing everything that we possibly can to take violent criminals off the street. In fact, this weekend alone, if you minus out the 6 guns that the sniper had, members of the Metropolitan Police Department recovered 40 illegal firearms in our city just this weekend. That number alone should make every person in this room cringe. 40 illegal firearms. And I assure you that this is as a result of hard work by officers going to get those firearms, because surely nobody just walked up and here are 40 firearms. These are encounters that our police officers had safely had, and there was an incident where we actually had to use a firearm this weekend where we encountered an armed individual who had shot another resident in the 800 block of Crittenden Street. But again, our officers showed up and they did their job on that particular day. Unfortunately, someone lost their life in that. But these are the dangers that our police officers are faced with as we try to tackle this issue of violent crime in our communities. It's about going out here. It's about being brave despite the things that we face, despite the shortages in staffing and all of those things that we talk about. These officers are out here every day, and they're trying to make sure it happens. They're trying to keep the citizens of the District of Columbia safe by making arrests and taking bad guys off the street. That's what we do. Next slide. So there are several other cases that happen, and I'm just going to highlight a few. And as I was, talking to members of my team over the weekend, some of you know I was away. I flew back to get back here just because of some of the issues that we were seeing. And I mean, I wish I could categorize this some other way, other than to just simply say that the level of ridiculousness that we are seeing in some of these instances. There was a man in a wheelchair shot in the 7,000 block of Blair Road. All this, again, is going on while MPD is dealing with the triple shooting, while MPD is also dealing with the sniper on Connecticut Avenue. We have a man shot in a wheelchair on Blair Road. It's reported to us that that man got into some type of argument with 3 young men, and some person decided that the responsible thing to do was to shoot a man in a wheelchair. That is unacceptable anywhere. And I don't know what program we have for that. I don't know what people are expecting to see for that, but people like that deserve to be in jail because they have demonstrated that they cannot function in community. They cannot abide by the community norms that everyone in this room expects to live by. And when we identify people like that, we have to hold those individuals accountable. And what does accountability look like? I ask you that question. What does accountability look like to every person in this room and every person watching this? And are we truly seeing the accountability that we want? And if not, then why not? What does that look like? Who has responsibility for that? I decided a month or 2 months ago, you know what, at the end of the day, I'm going to be responsible for, and I'm going to make sure that I'm doing everything that MPD can do. I can't worry about other parties in this. So many other things. We had a homicide this weekend, 700 block of Morton Street Northwest. There was a birthday party where a resident or a basement of a resident was rented out and rented out by the owner. And at some point, two men got into a fight. And of course, the only way to resolve that, a man stabbed and shot an individual to death at a party. Again, I don't know what program we have for that. But some people are not ready to be in community when they commit acts like this that make our communities unsafe. There was another shooting that occurred over on First Sterling Street. There was a guy who was there, a flagger, directing traffic. And traffic is backed up. And surely some people were upset about that. So, of course, a person on a rideshare bike comes up on the rideshare bike and shoots the flagger. Surely that makes sense. Or is that just another level of ridiculousness that we're talking about that we see in community? I'm sure there's a program for that. But again, you get back to how are we holding individuals accountable when they commit these types of violent acts in our community? We expect the police department to lock people up, and we do. And sometimes we lock them up more than one time. I am pleading with our communities and with our city as a whole as we focus on this issue. This is serious business and people are scared. And when people are scared, we have to take a different approach, a different look in terms of how we're doing the things that we do. Some of the violent crime that I want to talk about really quickly. We went back and we did a look at violent crime going back to 2014, looking up to 2022. And when you talk about overall violent crime, you go back to like 2014, the numbers of violent crimes overall for the last 8 years has actually decreased. But the number of violent crimes in the space of gun crime, since the pandemic, since 2020, those numbers have continued to increase in 2020 as well as in 2021. And that is an area of concern. It's an area of concern for me. It's an area of concern, I'm sure, for many community members. When we look at violent crime across the board, right now in the District of Columbia, we are 263 violent crimes over where we were the same time last year. Now, many of those crimes, when we talk about over, we're talking in the space of robbery, right? That accounts for the majority of those numbers that are over, because our homicide numbers, as of today, MPD is experiencing a 10% reduction as of today. We're at 53 homicides compared to 59 homicides. And while every person in this room has certainly heard me say before, one is one too many in any neighborhood. I don't care where it is. So whether we're talking about 53, 52, 51, those are people at the end of the day. All of those numbers, those are people behind every last one of those numbers. So, I don't get too caught up, oh, we got 5 left, 6 left, whatever, but I certainly know that if we were 7 over or 8 over, whatever, that also would be the story. But that's the real number in terms of where we are as of today. Where crimes are really showing up are in the space, as I mentioned before, of robberies. And that trend started at the very beginning of the year. The interesting thing about this robbery trend, while it did start up very high at the beginning of the year, we're also starting to see that number, the robbery number, trend downward, which is a good thing. We're starting to see the robbery number trend downward a little bit, starting from looking at where we were in January to now. But I can tell you, when you talk about the firearms that are on the street, when you talk about what we're seeing, that number is not letting up. We're already this year 50% over the firearms that we recovered last year. Already, and we're only in the month of April. That's the work of the Metropolitan Police Department right now. We're already 50% over. We're almost at 1,000 firearms recovered this year so far. That is a significant increase in the number of illegal firearms that we're seeing in our city. When you talk about carjackings so far for the year, we've had 165 carjackings. 75% of those carjackings involve somebody armed with a gun. 75% of those cases. If there is any good news that come out of that, is that the MPD has closed by arrest 60 of the 165 carjacking cases, or 36% of the carjacking cases. And when you look at what our closure rate is for robbery, the national average for the closure rate of robbery is about 24%. MPD is at 26% closure rate for robberies. I want them all to be closed, but let's understand really the context in which we're dealing with. When you have somebody that gets robbed and the person has a mask over their face or they have a hood on or something like that, sometimes identifying the person responsible can be very difficult to do. Right? So sometimes we're not able to close cases out in those instances where identification is very hard to make. But when you see something like what happened the other day when we have a 13-year-old that gets charged with, multiple carjackings, multiple armed robberies, that when those kinds of things happen, I mean, he's only one of many other cases in that space where we've had a few individuals charged with committing a whole lot of crime. Very recently, we had two brothers, and that was a very high-profile case where these two brothers were responsible for committing several robberies of establishments in our city. One of the locations you might remember was at Busboy and Poets, where they went in with firearms and everything. These two brothers were arrested, but they also committed carjacking. So I just say in that space that there's a lot of work, a lot of investigative work that's gone into that 26% closure rate for robberies, but there's still a lot more work to be done. I want to update you really quickly on one of the initiatives that we kicked off that we feel it's paying dividends for us, and that's in the space of our homicide reduction partnership. So far, we announced that a few back in the early part of March. Actually in February leading into March, but overall there's been a 24% decrease in violent crime in the homicide reduction partnership areas, to include a 67% decrease in homicides. So we had 9 homicides in the HRP areas in 2021. In 2022, we're down to 3 homicides in those areas. 6D Sector 3 has had a 26% decrease. 7D Sector 3 has had a 21% decrease. So we are headed in the right direction in our homicide reduction partnership areas, but I want to focus on the word partnership just for a hot second, because what I've seen, and that's part of the reason why we're here today, to talk about partnership, the places that we have had the most success is when we are partnered with our law enforcement partners, partnered with community. In those spaces, we're able to do some incredible things. And when I think back to when we closed out the case involving Mellon and MLK, and when Nia Courtney was murdered, that was a partnership case that really, working with community members, working with our federal partners, that really helped us along the way. When I think about the serial homeless shooter very recently, that was a partnership case where we worked together and we did some great things. We got another great case that's coming up where we're looking at a lot of indictments that we'll be talking about in the very near future. That's as a result of partnership that's happening. When I think about the Maserati guy shooter that we caught over in Costa Rica, all these things happen as a result of partnership. So in a space where we have a workforce that is not at maximum capacity, I think the best thing for us to do going forward is really build on the partnerships that we have. We have a partnership with Prince George's County Police Department as we work on our carjackings, and we have seen an incredible amount of results in that space in terms of these guys really making inroads in a lot of the cases. So we want to build on partnership. So today we have here with us our partners from ATF, DEA, FBI, or FBI is not here right now, but U.S. Marshals are here. We're going to talk about partnership a little bit. I think about the fentanyl overdoses that we had down in the Southwest. That case closed, those cases closed, those lives that were lost as a result of who sold those folks fentanyl was closed as a result of partnership, right? Those are important things, and we have to build on that. If the MPD is not at 4,000 or whatever number we feel it should be as a community, if we're not at that number, how do we expand on the partnerships that we have to get the most bang for our buck that's going to have impact in community? And the way that we're going to do that is through our violent crime impact teams. So right now, the violent crime impact teams, and I'll turn the mic over to these guys in a second, but really what we wanted to do, we wanted these individuals sitting side by side with MPD officers. We really kind of already had the model for this, but let's put these guys in a space where, in addition to operating in the homicide reduction partnership areas. But in other areas where we see these acute issues popping up, we have the flexibility to move these individuals around, to focus in on crime, and to do it in spaces where there needs to be an intense focus, or to do it in spaces where there is some leverage for our federal partners that they can kind of bring to the table to help us with these investigations. So I'm going to pause right there and then look down to the table to, I guess we can start with Charlie Patterson, who's the SAC of the Washington Field Office for the ATF, and Charlie can talk about ATF's role in the partnership.
Thank you, Chief.
Yep.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Charlie Patterson. I'm the Special Agent in charge of the ATF Washington Field Division.
Agent, your microphone, please.
Yes, sir. My name is Charlie Patterson. I'm the Special Agent in charge of the ATF Washington Field Division. Today, I'm here to pledge our full support of this violent crime initiative. We will continue to be in lockstep with the Metropolitan Police Department, our federal partners, and the United States Attorney's Office as we utilize crime, gun, intelligence-led policing to combat federal firearms violations and disrupt violent crime within the district. We stand in unison with you, the community. We hear your requests for assistance with violence. We see the misuse of firearms and constant violent criminal acts. We see how crime has terrorized families, and these acts are just simply unacceptable. ATF is committed to being no better partner and will ensure those that commit illegal firearm crimes are held accountable for their actions. Thank you.
Jarrett Forget, the head of the DEA Washington Field Office.
Thanks, Chief. First, I want to take a moment and thank Mayor Bowser, Chief Conte, MPD, and the other federal partners for being part of this incredible launch. I also want to thank all the media for coming out today and to cover this important topic. You all know that violent crime and overdose deaths in our city are a major concern for families and neighborhoods across the District of Columbia. For many years, DEA Washington has worked together with our law enforcement partners to reduce drug-related violent crime in our communities. However, today, the launch of the DC VSIT, we're doing something very different. The formation and launch of our new VSIT takes our efforts to combat drug-related violence and overdose to a whole new level of effectiveness for DC area residents. Our goal is not to saturate communities with federal law enforcement. Our plan is to work on focused investigations that will make the greatest impact for our neighborhoods here in DC. Our deployment strategies are more targeted than in years prior. Agents, officers, and analysts will be sitting together, working together, and focus on specific areas of the city where they know violence and drug overdoses are occurring. Investigations will be focused on those drug trafficking networks and specific individuals known to be furthering the most violent crimes. With the new VSIT, our enforcement efforts on this problem will be more efficient and impactful, making a real difference for all our city residents, especially those in our hardest hit communities. Along with our work here, it's important to remember that law enforcement alone cannot solve this problem. We need your help. We need the help of all of our residents. The last few years have taught us that effective proactive work like this cannot take place unless our community supports these efforts. Making a real difference in combating the incredible drug overdoses and gun violence we're seeing in this city takes work from all of us. We're here today to stand up and tell you about how we are doing just that, and we're asking for all your help in doing so. We will not tolerate deadly drugs being trafficked on our streets, killing our loved ones, and causing reckless violence near our homes. Our homes and communities should be safe places to live and work for everybody, and this team was created to help with just that. The time has come for us to take back our streets and restore public safety. Thank you.
And next, Lamont Ruffin, United States Marshal Service.
Thank you, Chief Conte. My name is Lamont Ruffin. I'm the acting United States Marshal for the District of Columbia. The Marshal Service is proud to join with our law enforcement partners in a coordinated and partnered response to reduce violent crime through the Violent Crime Impact Team initiative. Every day, our Deputy United States Marshals round up hundreds of fugitives from justice, but this initiative brings a renewed focus on our areas, with our local law enforcement officers where violent crime has surged. We know that by focusing on the most dangerous criminals in our nation, we're able to make a significant reduction in the extreme violence that they facilitate. This violent crime initiative represents how the United States Marshal Service is deeply committed to this city to our federal local partners, and assisting in reducing violent crime in our nation's capital. As Chief Conte said, enough is enough, and we have to do more. Through our own fugitive investigation, we've recovered 36 firearms from already wanted fugitives, and we have to do more. Thank you for inviting us to this initiative, and we continue with our continued support.
Thank you. And Matt Stoller from the United States Secret Service.
Thank you, Chief. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Matt Stoller. I'm the Special Agent in charge for the U.S. Secret Service Washington Field Office. The Washington, D.C. and Greater National Capital Region uniquely bring together law enforcement entities at every level, spanning multiple jurisdictions that routinely work together to ensure security and public safety. The U.S. Secret Service proudly participates in this critical network of partners and works in support of our fellow agencies and entities to reach collective goals, as well as to support each other's agency initiatives. While known for our protective responsibilities, the Secret Service has a long and storied tradition of investigations to help safeguard America's financial and payment systems from criminal exploitation. Over time, our investigative responsibilities have evolved, with a focus on complex transnational investigations into cyber-enabled crimes. Through a nationwide network of cyber fraud task forces, or CFTFs, the Secret Service brings to bear a robust community of investigators, analysts, and cyber experts ready and willing to support public safety at the community level. Today's announcement formalizes an already robust partnership between the Secret Service's Washington Field Office and the D.C. Metropolitan Police Department. In addition to routine public safety work, our two agencies enjoy long-standing and unique collaboration through the National Capital Region's Cyber Fraud Task Force. We are eager to leverage CFTF resources and extend our reach in the collective fight to reduce violent crime by supporting the Violent Crimes Impact Team. Nationwide public safety remains of critical importance, and we are privileged to join our esteemed partners in the fight to reduce violent crime here in the nation's capital. Working together and bringing all resources to bear will have a swift and significant impact on the rates of violence in our city, and the Secret Service stands steadfastly among this team in our shared mission to do so. Thank you.
So I want to thank all of my federal partners, again, just for their commitment and contribution. You know, my challenge to them really is to have skin in the game. And that's not just to our federal partners, but that's to the community. That's to anybody else who has a vested interest in what happens here in the District of Columbia. These guys have stepped up time and time again for every ask that I have put forth. Normally what happens, it's normally MPD who sends personnel to their federal task forces. And this is a change for them, operating in this space where they have now sent people to be, again, co-located with MPD, working in that space. One slide that I want to just focus on before we get to the Deputy Mayor is the slide where we show the map of where the guns have been recovered in this city by Metropolitan Police Department officers. Do we have that? Can we just go back to that one really quickly? I want members of the community to see that, where the guns are actually being recovered from. And when you look at this map, there's no section of the city that's not been touched. Not one section of our city has not been touched. The only district right now where we have recovered less firearms than we did last year is the first district, 6 less firearms. In the second district, we've recovered 57 more firearms than what we did so far this year as in comparison to last year. 33 more in the third district, 8 more in the fourth district, 111 more firearms in the fifth district, 49 more in the sixth district, and 71 in the seventh district. I have MPD operating on all cylinders to bring about change in our city. And I will continue to ask for the public's help and assistance as we try to bring these violent cases to closure. When we release these images, we need people calling in. You have heard me say time and time again that people respond differently depending on their proximity to the pain. This should be painful for all of us, and it should cause us all to respond differently. We see images of people who have terrorized our community. I want to thank the mayor and the rest of our partners just for an incredible support that they have given to the Metropolitan Police Department to bring about change in our community and reducing violent crime. Yeah.
Thank you, Chief. And I want to thank all the partners as well for always answering the call. I do want to spend a couple of minutes, Chris. We can have an entire briefing also on our non-law enforcement strategies, but I did want to close with a quick summary of those efforts.
Yes, ma'am. Okay, so what we're going to go to next. You've heard up here, and you heard the chief mention, the mayor's mentioned many times before. We have a criminal justice, a public safety and justice ecosystem here in the city and everywhere, every city that you have, there's an ecosystem like this. This is a depiction of what our ecosystem looks like right now. You have a prevention side, which the mayor just mentioned, and we just had a press conference actually last week talking about the investments and the increases that we're doing in the prevention side. This is non-law enforcement, pre-law enforcement intervention, coordinated delivery of services, violence interruption, getting into the communities and trying to stop things before they happen. Director Harley Harper and also our ONE's office with Director Delano Hunter are doing a lot of work in that area. We're increasing the levels there of what we have going on. We're building capacity there. As you follow the ecosystem around, you look into our intervention, our law enforcement side of this. The chief just mentioned everything that they're doing, leveraging partnerships and all of that. But it's important to come back to what the mayor has said over and over is we need the law enforcement officers on our street to be able to do these things because we have lost capacity when it comes to our law enforcement and intervention side of that, and we need to build that back. The chief is doing everything that he can for that, but we need to increase that capacity. On our accountability side, the chief mentioned this, the accountability side. This is our court systems and all of that happen around that. We have a lower capacity there. It is not new to anybody here that we are down currently, I believe, 14 judges in our court system, as well as all of that we had to go through for the pandemic and all the cases that, even though at their best efforts, we're still behind in cases. We're still just now opening up and starting to do in-person trials. So a lot of folks waiting just for their day in court, a lot of folks that didn't get held because we have a system that is backed up right now. And then onto our rehabilitation side, and this adds into where we get from the accountability side, we have over 700 people in our jail today that are in pretrial felony confinement waiting for their trial, some of them over 300 days. So we have a stretched capacity there as it is. This is the health of our ecosystem right now. As the chief mentioned and the mayor's mentioned in the past, we need to get our ecosystem back to health. And that's going to happen as the city opens back up, people come back to work, and we start actually doing things in the areas that have been curtailed over the time frame of the pandemic. And that's not in our prevention or in our law enforcement side. Some of the things that we've done for expansion, we have 3 new areas where we're bringing our violence interrupters into the city. There's additional 52 violence interrupters that are being hired this year that are going to work in these areas of the city, Congress Park, Edgewood, and Shaw Mount Vernon Triangle area, to include several that are going into roving teams that we can bring anywhere into the city where we need to bring violence interruption and start to head things off before they have to become a problem for the Metropolitan Police Department. This includes all the work that we're doing with those that we have identified that we talked about last week, those that are most high at risk of gun violence, either being perpetrators of or being victims of gun violence, and all the work that we're doing with those folks to ensure, even the mayor putting cabinet members in to ensure that this work is reaching its fruition with all of our agencies to ensure we get these folks attention that they need, the services that they need to find a better path than following the path of the gun, where then they come in contact with the Metropolitan Police Department or our chief medical examiner. Next slide.
Okay, so I think that's what we have today on our non-law enforcement efforts. So let's take some questions. Any questions? Yes, sir. Please introduce yourself.
Sir, my name is Louis Chavez. I'm with Reuters. A quick question for the chief of police. The suspect, from the news reports, he was found dead in the apartment. Was he, or rather, he was dead. Was he found dead? What was the cause of death?
He shot himself as we were entering. We began to make entry. We rammed the door. There was some type of appliance, refrigerator, something against the door. He obviously heard us make an entry into the apartment, and ultimately he shot and killed himself.
Mm-hmm. Were there any letters, any motive left?
We are still examining exactly what the motive is, but specifically answering your question, there were no letters that we saw that were open to us at that point. But again, a lot of times these types of things are online, that kind of thing. So we're looking into all those spaces to see if we can really get to the bottom of this and the motive behind it. Yes, sir.
Stephanie?
Thank you. All right. So the partnership today, it appears to address the illegal crimes illegal guns in the city and drugs. But Chief, you're telling us that it appears that the firearms used Friday were purchased legally. So how does this partnership address that, and how do you assure parents, especially who are very scared, that their children are safe in the city?
Well, in terms of how the partnership, I think that the VSIT announcement is kind of a separate you see on that day, all of these entities were represented there on the scene of the shooting. And this is the first time, we got together and we're trying to figure out what each other are doing. I think we were in lockstep with these guys from day one. The VSIT thing speaks to the overall violence that we're seeing in the city. Specifically, when you talk about what happened at Van Ness, when you have a lone wolf type scenario, a depraved individual in this case that thought it was okay to do this, I don't know of a partnership that would prevent that. And I'd be lying to residents if I say, hey, look, this is something that prevents that. I think what we have to see, or what we may have to make sure that the public is aware of, is that we have a police department and a federal partnership that is capable of handling those type of situations when they do happen. In our city, when we had a lone wolf sniper targeting individuals in our community, in the matter of a couple of hours, we were able to isolate the individual. We were able to identify who that person is, get that image out to the community, tactically advance on that person's property, get the children removed from the school, get the building evacuated with residents, make an arrest of an armed individual as we were doing all of that, and simultaneously handle a triple shooting in another part of the city and a man shot in a wheelchair someplace else. So when you talk about the overall picture, you have a police department here in the nation's capital that has the capacity to handle all of those things simultaneously.
Another question I have, if you don't mind. We've been reporting on the increase in homicides for years in the district. Mayor, respectfully, under your leadership, why this now? Why this partnership now?
We have partnerships that we put together to respond to what we see in the community.
So why this one now?
Just what I said, Stephanie. I don't know what else to tell you. That if we think that the chief of police thinks that he needs more capacity and expertise, that's exactly what he's going to call on. I think it's especially helpful now when our resources at MPD for officers is less than it has been in years past. And so I do want, and I'll leave it at that.
May I ask one more question, Chief? Have you been in contact with the family? It appears that the 23-year-old is local. He's from the area. Are the parents working with you? Is the family working with you? Is there any history of mental illness here?
We are working with the family. I have not spoken directly to the family. Obviously, this is a very trying time for them as well, and we're trying to be sensitive in that space while simultaneously trying to progress the law enforcement investigation. Some of the things that I've reported to you today, we know as a result of our contact with the family, and we will continue to do that. Again, I want to make an appeal to the community. Anyone who has had contact with this individual, you were a friend of this person, and you've been, you had a phone conversation with them 2 weeks ago. We're asking you to contact us on 202-727-9099. Please hit option 4. To call in any information that might help us really kind of get to the bottom of this. We're trying to really put the pieces together kind of, after the event has taken place, and there's a lot of meticulous work that goes into that, and we're seeking the public's help in that space.
Sam?
Yes. Chief, you were there at the Peruvian embassy last
Sam,
week.
where are you? I'm sorry.
I'm right here.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I got you.
So you were there at the Peruvian embassy last week, and I see the Secret Service is here.
Yeah.
Secret Service officers killed that individual. But I understand there's some report out that this Ness sniper and the person that the Secret Service officers killed in Northwest had some knowledge of each other or friendship. Is there any truth to that?
Yeah, so we're investigating. It's reported that the girlfriend of the person who died at the embassy lived in the same building. His girlfriend lived in the same building on Van Ness. So we're looking into that, and just, I mean, that, you know, it could be coincidence, could be whatever, but we're looking into that.
So you just don't know. You just gotta.
Yeah, we gotta really kind of make our way through that, Sam. And again, just kind of, you know, the girlfriend. I mean, you know, she may just be the girlfriend of this individual, happens to live in the building. But you know, I don't want, you know, all these cameras leaving here trying to go knock on her door and interview her. I mean, we're trying to be sensitive in that space. So we don't know if one has anything to do with the other or if it's just a coincidence. But if there is, I'm certainly sure that through this investigation we'll find a connection if there is one.
Mark?
Yeah, Chief, on Van Ness, do you believe that the school was his target?
It's kind of hard to say, Mark, that that the school specifically was the target. You know, my gut tells me that just where he was focused and where he was shooting, he certainly intended to do what he did. Why is what I don't know why. But I have to believe that based upon his location and where he was shooting, where people have seen this video that's out there and all that, I have to believe that, that is not something that we can rule out at this point. Maybe there's a writing somewhere, where he said something that will, kind of lead us to it. We know that he's lived there only since January. But again, I can't definitively say that this is it. Maybe his thing, when I think back to shootings like, what happened in Dallas where several police officers were murdered several years ago. I mean, you have a shooting at a location that draws first responders to a particular spot. I mean, he could have very well wiped out several first responders. I mean, maybe that, I just don't know. And as we work through the investigation, my hope is that we really kind of get to the bottom of why he did this.
Can you give us any indication on how long he had been planning this?
It's kind of hard to say, Mark. We know, again, that he's purchased these firearms. We know that he's lived there since January. He has a place in Fairfax County and this place in D.C. that's not far away. It could go back as far as 4 months. I don't know. I mean, he could have, had he waited a few minutes when there's dismissal going on. He wouldn't have to shoot at a window of cars. I mean, he could have actually shot people who were on the street at that point. So it's really kind of hard to say at this point, if that is really his true motive. I'm hoping that as we exploit his devices and kind of go through, that we're able to get to that, and we can share that with the public at that point to say, hey, kind of here's a better picture, or at least understanding of why he was doing this, at least through his lens, why he did what he did. And again, and maybe there's some members in the public who this guy may have communicated with, and he may have said, some things about the school or the people attending the school. I don't know, that might be helpful to us in this space. We're just trying to understand, at this point. Again, we're in very close, proximity to when this happened, and certainly a lot of work has to still go forward to get to that point.
Thank you.
Purchases of the weapons, did he buy them all at once, recently, over the course of how long?
He purchased them over a period of time. The two handguns were, pretty much just kind of off-the-shelf purchases. The long guns, the ones that are here, the way that they are assembled, are either he assembled them or he had someone to assemble them for him. But the pieces, the parts of the weapon, it appears that they were all legal purchases.
Okay, Janae, Lou, and was there a question here? Julie? Janae?
Hey, Janae with Axios, thanks. Could you give us a summary of what the investigation currently looks like at Van Ness? Is there still areas blocked off, and also, what's the sense of the damage maybe beyond the school? Is there, were there bullet holes in other places? How far did these bullets travel, I guess.
Yeah, so we're still working at the apartment. Excuse me, we're still working at the apartment. I was through there yesterday, and we may have a small area of the school that might still be blocked off. I'm not sure if we're done with that just yet. We know that a car, several cars actually were shot up. Again, these are over 200 rounds that were fired. But several cars were shot up. Two of those cars, one belonged to an embassy close by. Another car was of someone who was there picking up someone. And at this point, we know that there have been about 2 additional reports for buildings beyond the immediate Burks and the apartment building on Van Ness. So we've received just about 2 additional reports. I've appealed to community members, and I will continue to make that appeal. Let's make sure that we check on our neighbors. The velocity of a round fired from one of these rifles can go a very long way. I'm talking about thousands of yards. And it is very important that we check on our neighbors just to make sure that everything is okay, that there's no errant round that went through a window or something like that that we're not aware of.
2 buildings were?
On the lower end of Connecticut Avenue, south of Van Ness Street. I forget the name of the place, but on the lower end of Connecticut Avenue.
Is it as far as Cleveland Park, or is that too far?
I'm not sure. I can't recall exactly where, but it was certainly within in the neighborhood down there. And I'm tempted to say it did include that little Cleveland Park section down there. But
is there an update on the 3 hospitalized victims?
So 2 are still currently hospitalized, and their conditions are still critical, both of them. Again, we're asking for the public's prayer for those persons. As we talked about, one of those individuals is a retired member of the Metropolitan Police Department who I commanded when I was the commander of the 2nd District. So we're asking that we please keep them in prayer.
And the other one who's still hospitalized is?
The female, yes, she was there at the location. She was inside of the vehicle. One of the bullets came through the vehicle, and it struck her. She was very critical on the scene, but thank God for medical intervention. They were able to at least get her to a stable status right now. So she's at a hospital, and they are not out of the woods by any stretch of the imagination, but right now it appears they're hanging in there.
Yes, Chief, as a quick follow-up again on this sniper case,
Yeah.
Is it known at all about whether the individual who's believed to have done this actually held the lease to the apartment on Van Ness Street as well as the one in Fairfax, and where he may have gotten the financial capability to do this and to purchase all the guns? Was he employed?
Yeah, you should be an investigator, Lou. That's where I'm working. I'm working in that space right there trying to figure that out. When he applied for the apartment in D.C., just about his entire transaction was online, so we're going through that to just kind of figure out how he's paying his bills and keeping the lights on and all that kind of thing. We've got some preliminary indicators about that, but I don't have anything concrete on that just yet. So he is the leaseholder for that location, as well as the location in Fairfax County. So we're working through all of that just to see, how such a young man is able to, handle, multiple leases and do the things that he did. Purchase these firearms. These are not inexpensive firearms, and certainly the hardware that's on there, the scopes and stuff, is very expensive firearms, and we want to get to the bottom of that.
Could we assume that the apartment building, which is a rental building, is cooperating?
Yeah, you can make that assumption. We haven't had any issues. Everybody is working, working with us on this. I think it's certainly in the interest of the greater public, to understand the answers to some of these questions that we just don't have the answers to right now. So again, understanding that we do have a deceased suspect in this case, and working with his family, we have an entire city, that was terrorized by this. Again, I think back to the sniper's case. That we had in our city that went over, or in the region, that went over the course of weeks, where people were afraid to pump gas in a car, right? I mean, but to be able to get this resolved to this point, this quickly, and now we just got to kind of put the pieces put the pieces together on the back end. We can do that work. I'm just glad that this part of it, at least of the investigation, has been resolved.
Okay, Julie.
Thank you. Julie Weil from the Washington Post. I have a few questions for the chief and one for the mayor, if I may. First of all, Chief Conte, all 9 of these firearms he purchased legally, all 9 of them in Virginia, is that correct?
So 6 of them are intact, fully functional firearms, right? And those are the 6 that were located in the District of Columbia. Then he has 3 that are like, and I hate to use technical terms, but it's like the lower receiver, if you will, of the firearm that he legally purchased. And then he was purchasing the parts, the top part, if you will, the barrel and all those other. He was purchased the parts to assemble the firearms that were, or the lower receivers that were in Virginia. They were all legally purchased. I don't recall off the top of my head exactly where he purchased them from, but I'm certainly 100% confident that he purchased these things legally.
And you said that 3 of them were fully automatic weapons.
Yes.
Can you tell us about how he did that? Did he have a giggle switch or something?
No, these are not giggle switches here. The way that they were assembled, he was able to make them fully automatic, and that shouldn't be.
Okay. And do you know anything about any sort of ideology that he espoused, or?
I honestly, I wish I had more to tell you. I mean, like I said, I think I've given you everything to what he ate, prior to this happening. But I honestly do not know yet. I don't know anything more than what we've shared. And as we continue to move forward, my hope is that we will be able to really peel back the onion and get to all of these answers that I'm sure, and beyond the public, I think beyond the immediate public in the District of Columbia, I've talked to my colleagues in police departments all around the country. Everybody wants to know, and we want to be able to provide those answers, but we want to make sure that we're giving accurate information and not just our anecdotal thoughts at this point.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
There's a slide here that I wanted to return to that I think was very interesting, that lists some very large potential causes for an increase in violent crime. It lists everything from race-related and political unrest to people's increased willingness to use guns. Can you tell us what on this slide you're thinking? What do you think the causes are of an increase in violent crime?
Well, obviously, I think that all of those things are the causes. What it says here, and what we've talked about throughout, is that these issues are complex. We're not only experiencing them here in Washington, D.C., but we see them around the country. You've heard me talk a lot about how our ecosystem that Chris has referred to already has been upended. It's not all back up in 100% or in person, and people are living on the edge. And so we see that. We see it with the fentanyl deaths. We even see it with aggressive driving on our streets, and disconnected from their regular services. So getting kids back in school was my real focus at the early part of this pandemic, because it connects young people and their families to professionals who can help them. So that's important. It's important that the folks who are involved in the criminal justice system, and they have a supervising agency, they have required job training, that it's open and that it's in person for them to do it. People who are even going to their jobs instead of being in a home alone or home with family members that may or may not be a good environment for them. Getting back to normal and back to work, we know will help with all manners of making our communities safer. So what is important, however, is just like the chief said, that he's going to do all in his power This government is going to do all in its power. We're going to reach out to get, even expand our resources. But we need everybody in the system, and that includes the community, to be thinking the exact same way. We will get safer together. We do have, and we are really lucky in our city to have a lot of resources to bring to bear. I know that Linda and her counterparts speak often, but we're able to have subsidized employment for people who come forward. We're able, if a community member calls and can make us aware of an illegal gun, to offer a huge reward. It's important. Now, the chief went over all of the guns that were collected in the city, and I see something else when I see that chart. What I see is sometimes when the number is higher in a community, that means the community is doing a lot. That means a commander is doing a lot to remove guns. Sometimes when is lower, it doesn't necessarily mean that there are fewer guns. So we want to see in every part of the city people making us aware of illegal guns. And we also, I can't just emphasize enough, all of the resources. If you come forward and you're willing to make a change, we can help you make that change. So, long answer to your question. There's no one thing that has anywhere in the nation. I don't think anybody is pointing to one reason, but there are a lot of complex reasons that we're seeing increased violence in our country. Thank you. Yes.
Chief, back to the Van Ness street shootings.
Please introduce yourself, sir.
Hi, Matthew Torres with WSA 9.
Thank you.
You mentioned the camera set up out in the hallway. Can you elaborate more on that? Was this his personal camera? How long has it been there? And was there monitors in his room that you can see the hallway if officers are coming?
Yeah, so he had a camera. It was on the floor outside of the apartment. We think it was recently put there based upon some of the interviews that we've done. It was recently placed there, and it was absolutely for the purposes of seeing law enforcement as we progress down the hallway. I think there was a post or something that he made out there. They're looking in the wrong part. So. Again, just really trying to put all the pieces together. Inside of his bathroom, where he ultimately ended his life, he had like a little command center set up in there. He had a laptop computer. He had a cell phone in the bathtub. He had like a pillow and some blankets, and he had a long gun as well as a firearm in there. So he was essentially, doing everything that he was doing from the confinement of the bathroom of his apartment.
Chief, I know you said you can't rule out whether or not the school was in fact
Yes.
targeted. Knowing that the victims were on school property, can you say if this was a school shooting? Would you just categorize it as that?
I mean, it occurred, at a school. I don't, and that's the second time someone has asked that question. I don't know, I'm not trying to split hairs about, it happened at a school, right? People there, the former officer who was there, he worked at the school. Some people were coming to pick up kids were from the school. I don't know how else to say it. The school was certainly in his line of sight. We want to be definitive about why he did what he did, but I think it's a safe bet to say that he did what he did for whatever reason he had, and the school was certainly within his crosshairs.
Okay. Has anybody not asked a question that wants to ask a question? Okay. 1, 2, 3, and then we'll finish there. Mark.
Yes, 2 questions, one for you, Mayor, but first for the chief and for the special agent from the Secret Service. Can you update us on the Peruvian shooting investigation? And for the special agent, can you tell us if your officers were actually injured? We were told by the chief they were taken to the hospital. Your press release said they were charged by the man, but can you tell us, were they actually injured, what their condition is?
Chief?
Yeah, sure, go ahead, man.
So they were taken to local area hospitals for evaluation, which I think the chief can attest is standard protocol there. So.
injured?
No.
No, okay. And then, so, Chief, what can you tell us about your team is investigating this?
Yeah.
What was the need for that you've seen so far for lethal force? We're told this man had a pole. We don't know how long or how big or how violent he was acting.
Thank you, Mark. It was a metal stake like a tiki torch, like with a sharp edge on the end of it. And as we understand it, he was making jabbing motions at the officers. I think as part of the press release and what we learned in the early part of the investigation, they initially deployed their ECD, their taser, but that taser didn't stop the threat. And apparently, at least where we are right now in the investigation, at the time of the shooting, that's what was going on with this guy threatening this metal pole. I mean, I don't want to be stabbed with a metal pole. I don't think anybody else does either. And certainly these officers in this situation, that was the reason for the shooting. So we'll continue to work through it. Again, we interviewed the family members, the staff from the ambassador's residence, interviewed them about what they saw, all part of their witness statements and so forth, and all of that will be included in the final investigation. And we're obviously not at the point where we can make a final conclusion about the investigation, but based upon the reports that we've received so far, that's essentially what we got.
Is there a video of the incident?
There is not. There is no video of the incident. The officers were not wearing body-worn cameras, and there are no cameras at the residence that capture the location in the backyard.
Thank you, Chief. I appreciate that update. And Mayor Bowser, off topic for you, there was an incident in Chevy Chase, Maryland, over the weekend where some affordable housing advocates were protesting at the site of a proposed new library. And it's been reported that the residents there who were in opposition to affordable housing made comments, one of which was they don't want Chevy Chase becoming Anacostia. And I'm wondering if you can react to hearing that from your neighbors from Montgomery County.
Well, that's not all my neighbors in Montgomery County. Okay, so I don't think it. Look, Mark, I've been in a lot of conversations where a NIMBY attitude is one or a few of many voices, and I know when people, how people react when we in the government want to build more housing. I, for one, have advocated that Montgomery County, and I'm the D.C. mayor, I live in D.C., I pay taxes in D.C., but I think Montgomery County needs more affordable housing too. And so I'll leave it at that. But I would not characterize that as the predominant view in the county. Yep.
Mayor, I'd like to ask you your response to what Charles Allen gave as a response to the police funding sort of debate at the council now. Charles Allen says that you're raising this supposed conflict over money he cut for proposed incentives that were about a squad car, a take-home squad car for MPD officers. You, of course, came out very forcefully against what his committee did. Is this an issue about a squad car? Is there more here from your point of view?
Yes, it was more, and you've heard me talk, and I won't have this debate reduced to kind of a squabble among a council member, and it's more than that. We've just been talking about safety, and my job is to tell D.C. residents and the D.C. council what the police chief needs. And after 2 years of not being able to hire, we have to replenish our force. We have to. And so it's not enough for the council to say, you can hire 347 officers, but I'm going to take away the incentives that you need to compete. No offense to these fine gentlemen, with all of these people who are also hiring, okay? So we have to have a competitive incentives package. So my statement is a long-standing one since I proposed the budget and over the last 2 budget cycles is we need the police that we need, and we need to be in a position to hire the best of the best. It is not It is not going to get us there to chip away at the package. It has to move together. It's a $30 million package, and it has to move together. And more than that, I was talking to some school leaders who represent our administrative officials, principals and vice principals. They're horrified at the thought, especially now, to remove trusted police officers from school buildings. So there are some policy differences. We have some budgetary differences with what the committee did, but the entire council has the ability to move the whole package, and we hope that they do that.
I think we'd like to, understand though, like there's 20,000 in for a sign-on bonus. The committee says it's advanced. Other tripling or doubling other incentives. I mean, what was lost?
$6 million was cut. So we advanced a $30 million package. I don't have the list in front of me, but $6 million was cut. So 2 of that 6 related to take-home vehicles, which you may poo-poo as not important, but the people who actually are out there recruiting police officers, one of the top things that an officer says that he or she will choose which department he or she goes to is the ability to have a take-home vehicle. The other thing, it has an added benefit, neighbors like it. They like to see the police car for visibility parked in their community. So that's a $2 million. And then we have education incentives and housing incentives that were reduced as well. And let me just say a little bit about the education incentives, because they're really aimed at our mid-career officer. This is not for new recruits. This is for retention. And part of our proposal is not only that we're able to hire 347, but that we're able to keep up to 300. And that is how we get our force back. And so this is a retention package as well, which we have been cut by. So it is $6 million cut from our $30 million proposal that is aimed at us hiring 347 and keeping 300. Thank you, everybody. The chief and team, MPD team, can show you what they've been able to recover. I forgot.